Greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I invite you to watch and listen to the Designing Hollywood podcast, brought to you by Martika Ibarra and the great, legendary Hollywood costume designer, Marilyn Vance. I am afforded the wonderful opportunity of co-hosting the show. If you are interested in the magic of Hollywood, the design of Hollywood, the clothes of Hollywood, watch the Designing Hollywood podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from, or find the video version on YouTube. That's right, the Designing Hollywood podcast. Why would you ever want to miss it? Especially if you love the movies.
Observations with Robert Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am robcasting at you, you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek singularity community, the most fun, inclusive, and all-around uplifting community on all of YouTube. Something happened cool today for those of you who do or have ever tuned in or listened to the Designing Hollywood podcast. I interviewed Paul Tazwell, he was the costume designer on West Side Story. He also was the costume designer on Lin-Manuel Miranda's Hamilton. What an impressive guy. I have to say, I really enjoyed speaking with him. He has a lot of really great insight. He, of course, has impeccable credentials, and what a talented individual. That should be up in about a week, right after my Susan Matheson episode goes up. She was the costume designer on Don't Look Up and a lot of Adam McKay's other movies, including my favorite, The Big Short. So that's exciting. Well, kids, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, kind souls, all you members of the Post-Geek Singularity community, however you identify. At 1 o'clock this afternoon, Nelly and Deriva on Deadline, and it was on Variety, it was everywhere because it was a press release, reported that the Star Trek hostage crisis is going to continue. Star Trek Discovery has been renewed for a fifth season. A fifth season. 2 more seasons beyond the original Star Trek series. My beloved original Star Trek series. But we knew that. Star Trek Discovery seasons 4 and 5 were basically greenlit at the same time. And of course, Star Trek Picard is going to debut on Thursday, March 3rd for season 2, where we're going to see a parade of Star Trek cliches rolled out before us. Maybe there'll be something original in there, but I doubt it. However, hope springs eternal. It can't be worse than season 1, can it? But I'm hoping it'll be all right. Now, I believe that'll be the end of Star Trek Picard. Maybe it'll be the end of Robot Picard, because remember, Jean-Luc Picard died at the end of season 1. Why they did that, I don't know. Maybe Q will change him back into a real boy. Who's to say? But we knew that Picard season 3 was getting made. Star Trek Strange New Worlds was given a release date, May 5th. My wholly different this year, doesn't it, kids? But it was also announced that Star Trek Strange New Worlds also had 2 seasons. Now, let me just say, I don't necessarily think this was news to anyone, because as far as Star Trek goes, they wouldn't just make a single season of a show, because Star Trek shows are expensive to make. Sets, props, costumes, all that stuff. And what they do is Star Trek shows, unbeknownst to certain people that used to work at CBS like Les Moonves, did not understand that Star Trek shows have traditionally always been front-loaded with expense, because you can't buy clothes off the rack, you can't buy props off the rack, unless you're making like Star Trek 09 or Star Trek Into Darkness, in which case you buy scanners or things right off the rack and put them on the set. I guess they've always done that, but maybe in not such an obvious way. Like, don't put things we can recognize as controllers on the bridge, maybe. I don't know. That was a while ago. But anyway, I know I'm being petty. I'm being petty. But it did get a 2-season commitment when they made it. So they did announce today officially that there's going to be a second season. Star Trek Lower Decks will return in the summer with a third season. And Lower Decks has also been renewed for a 10-episode fourth season. I am sure that when Star Trek Lower Decks was renewed for a third season, it was renewed for 2 seasons because you need a long lead time on these shows. It takes a long time to make animation. And for those of you who might be paying attention, an animated series that I worked on, of course, has dropped on Netflix. Season 2 of Dota Dragon's Blood. Dota dropped today. Dota Dragon's Blood Season 2 dropped today. Created by my friend Ashley Edward Miller. He and I had previously worked together on Agent Cody Banks, a movie I co-produced that helped get him hired to write. So it was fun to work on a show that he had created. The second season, the 8-episode second season, has dropped. And I think you should give it a look. And if you're not into anime, I understand. I can understand that. But it is a pretty great show. And if you like adult fantasy, it's designed for you. And wait till you get to the end of that 4th episode this season. I, of course, was one of the animatic editors here in the States on the show, and very proud of the work the team did. So that's pretty exciting. Star Trek Prodigy is going to continue on. The second episode, the second 10-episode long second half of Season 1 will be available on Paramount Plus in 2022. Now, there was a quote in this press release. 4 years ago, we made a promise to grow Star Trek into something it had never been before. Really? You mean bad? No, I'm just kidding. And thanks to the incredibly hard work done by our many talented showrunners, writers, and directors, along with the extraordinary support of CBS Studios and Paramount Plus, we're keeping our word, said Alex Kurtzman, architect and executive producer of the Star Trek franchise. Listen to that. Architect and executive producer for the Star Trek franchise. Now our current shows are set up for the future as we work to build Trek's next phase of programming for years to come. Wow. Just amazing. I mean, I am curious as to who is watching all of these shows. Where are the ratings? Now, I asked myself that question, and I did do a little bit of research. And it was reported back in December of this year that Star Trek Discovery is the most watched original series on Paramount Plus, followed by iCarly. How many original series are there on Paramount Plus? And this article was actually reported by Collider. Nicole Zamlaut wrote this, and I just wanted to give, to make sure that I'm fair and balanced. Paramount Plus is wrapping up its inaugural year with a look at what has been trending on the platform over the past year. From most binge series to top-performing genres, Paramount Plus has had quite the opening year and only seems to be getting started. According to the platform, the critically acclaimed series Star Trek Discovery and the new hit series iCarly have taken the top spots of the first and second most watched series, respectively, with iCarly also taking the top spot of most downloaded episodes to watch on the go, with its debut episode, I Start Over. With the popularity of this reboot of the Nickelodeon classic, it makes sense that Kids and Family has become the most watched genre, with reality and crime taking up the second and third place spots. Within that top genre, SpongeBob SquarePants was the number 1 most binged series, and Paw Patrol the movie takes the top spot for most rewatched film. As far as most watched original series, Mayor of Kingstown has taken the top spot, the newly scripted drama taking the spot within its first 30 days. Now, what's curious is, it does say in this article that Star Trek Discovery and the new hit series have taken on the top spots of the first and second most watched series, respectively. But the new series, Mayor of Kingstown, has taken the top spot. As far as most watched original series. So do they not consider Star Trek Discovery an original series, I guess, because it wasn't made for Paramount Plus? Maybe. So if that's the case, how do they delineate? Is Mayor of Kingstown getting better views than Star Trek Discovery? It doesn't say. As far as most watched original series, Mayor of Kingstown has taken the top spot, the newly scripted drama taking the spot within its first 30 days. Of course, this series isn't the only drama that has grown popular on the platform, with SEAL Team taking the #1 spot and Evil not far behind. Of course, not everyone was knee-deep in dramas this year. South Park post-COVID became the most watched comedy on the platform, and for those who love reality television, RuPaul's Drag Race All-Stars was the top choice for many. I would ask, I really wonder, what is the game plan for Star Trek? So you have Star Trek Discovery, which is an ongoing series. You've got Star Trek Picard, which is going to probably run 3 seasons. So call that, I guess you'd have to call that a series as well. Strange New Worlds gets 2 seasons. And Star Trek Lower Decks and Star Trek Prodigy. Are these supposed to be directed at different audiences or the same audiences? I would maintain that I'm willing to bet that the Star Trek audience is not as big as they would have you believe. And if you look at how they're doing all of these shows, Star Trek Discovery, Star Trek Picard, and Strange New Worlds appeal to the same audience. They're the same audience. It's not like anyone who watches Star Trek is going to watch those shows. The real question that I have, and of those people, some of them are going to watch Prodigy and some of them are going to watch Lower Decks. There's some people that just animation doesn't appeal to them or whatever. Maybe they might gain newer viewers with Star Trek Lower Decks and Star Trek Prodigy, but I don't know. The whole point of doing these shows is to build an audience across streaming. And I would be curious to see, are they doing that? Are they gaining new subscribers because of these shows? Or have they topped out? The whole point about having new streaming shows nowadays is to build your audience. I don't see these Star Trek shows building an audience. I would be hard-pressed to be convinced that the Star Trek shows is creating more subscribers for the platform because people who like Star Trek will already sign up. So what is the point of these Star Trek shows? Well, I'll tell you. The point of this Star Trek, this era of Star Trek television, is to brand Star Trek and sort of make it the classic Star Trek, older Star Trek, is no longer relevant. They're literally trying to replace Star Trek. Look, they're even going back and they're giving you new Spock and new Uhura and new Nurse Chapel. They're going back and they are replacing old Star Trek because they're hoping to create a new brand of Star Trek for a modern audience. That's what they think they're trying to do. Is it working? I think they're only appealing to an audience that already exists. And there are, of course, younger people, as there always were, discovering Star Trek. But I don't think you're seeing the kind of growth in the Star Trek audience you saw in, say, 1994, when Star Trek The Next Generation went off the air with All Good Things, with a huge chunk of the ratings. For a syndicated show, Star Trek was a much bigger phenomenon then than it is now. And I think that this is I'd love to see the real numbers. But, I read an article that I wanted to share with you in reading this news about them, once again, why they keep doing this with Star Trek. And there's no, I don't think there's any evidence that shows any real growth. I mean, I would love to see, do the shareholders think that Star Trek is really adding all of this value to CBS, Viacom? I would love to see that evidence. But hey, they won't even let me follow the Star Trek on Paramount Plus Twitter feed. I was pre-blocked by them. But I found a really interesting article that a friend of mine named Jeffrey Morris wrote. Jeffrey Morris is an aspiring filmmaker. He's a production designer. He's a writer. He's created some cool Parallel Man, a really cool comic series. He's currently prepping what will be his first feature film, Persephone, and he's been working with Kevin Anderson, the author, who writes the Dune books with Brian Herbert. Kevin Anderson's been writing the novel. They have a finished version of Persephone as a novel, and hopefully Jeffrey will be able to finally get Persephone off the ground and make his feature filmmaking debut. He made a really cool Oceanus, a underwater adventure story, which he shot the first third of. It's really, really cool. He wrote an article, and let's face it, he and I are pretty like-minded people, and he wrote an article that I wanted to share with you on this channel. And I think that it's worth sharing. And, you're going to hear points that I've made before, but I just wanted to share this article with you because I thought it was pretty damn good. So here is the article, and he calls it The Current State of Star Trek. This is on his website, futuredude.com. futuredude.com. Go give his website a look at futuredude.com, see what he has to say. But I like this article a lot, so I thought I would share it. Imagine being a student of World War II history and a fan of films about that tumultuous time. Perhaps movies like Midway, Tora Tora Tora, and Patton are among your favorites. You've been watching films like these for decades. You've studied the battles. You know the players. You understand the weapons and tactics. You get it. The same way some people know baseball statistics, you know all about World War II. And while some films are inconsistent in their execution and even get a few details wrong, you know a great war film when you see one. When you revisit the classics from time to time, you also wait for each new World War II film with anticipation, hoping it will capture that history in stunning and accurate detail. You are totally open to stories like Dunkirk that use modern filmmaking and editing to tell historical tales in new ways. But no matter what, you still want your World War II films to make sense. Now imagine that a group of upstart modern producers are given tens of millions of dollars to create a fresh take on World War II for modern audiences. Instead of experts in military history, they bring in writers who normally create romantic comedies and police dramas to serve as the writing staff. They hire a production designer who typically creates children's TV shows and sitcoms. Together, they proceed to make a new vision of the 1940s, and while they reference actual locations and people, they decide to give them all a sleek contemporary facelift. It's the only way to reach new viewers, they say. War films need to evolve to appeal to today's audiences. Okay. So instead of P-51s and Corsairs, the design team decides to use modern fighter jets like F-35s because the audience will relate to them better, rather than propeller-driven planes. They add yet-to-be-invented helicopters because they look super cool. They recast real historical figures in edgy and challenging ways. Winston Churchill is now a bodybuilding 25-year-old strategic genius who has a thing for hot women and hamburgers. And Adolf Hitler becomes a cross-dressing sailor with an appetite for makeup and political power. Key circumstances of the World War II timeline are reordered or left out completely. Why? Because who cares about history when you've got a fun new story to tell? As a World War II buff, how would you feel as people begin to embrace this new vision? That a huge number of folks actually liked it better. You'd end up being shocked, sad, and dismayed. Something you've cared about and understood for so many years has become a bastardized version of itself and destroyed, and yet millions openly embrace it. When you try and have a civil discussion regarding your misgivings about this new World War II series, you're told that you're a closed-minded old person yelling at whippersnappers to get off your lawn, or yelling at clouds. Unfortunately, this is how many long-term fans of Star Trek feel about Star Trek Discovery. Yes, I know, many fanboys are currently rolling, and accusations of butthurt, whatever that means, are about to be slung in my direction. But before you jump to conclusions, I implore you to hear me out. I'm not here to dissuade anyone of their love of Discovery, but at least I want to explain why I, and folks like me, don't care for it. Regardless of what anyone wants to say about tolerance or Vulcan-itic, I just don't find this series to be Star Trek at its core, and I'm not sure I ever will. It has to do with the overall approach, the show's DNA. It just isn't connected to the lineage I came to know, love, and follow for decades. I'll admit, I'm an old-school Trek aficionado. I have been for as long as I can remember. I first saw the show in afternoon reruns as a small child. I think I was about 4 years old at the time, and I would watch it virtually every day, and even memorize the episode order so I could catch my favorite episodes each time they would play. After Jerry Anderson's amazing UFO, which I still love to this day, so do I, and the campy Lost in Space, Star Trek was the third science fiction series I'd ever seen. I was blown away by the production design, costumes, special effects, and most of all, the Enterprise. Star Trek pointed the way to an amazing future that seemed just around the corner. As I simultaneously witnessed the Apollo launches to the moon, the show seemed to connect to a world that was growing and evolving right before my eyes. If astronauts could bounce around on the lunar surface in 1972, then what was to prevent us from eventually zipping through the galaxy at warp speed on a starship in the 23rd century? One of my most fond early memories of building models of the Enterprise and the Galileo shuttlecraft with my father. I also remember my mother sewing me a Captain Kirk outfit for costume day at school. My close friends and I would play Star Trek on the playground and come up with our own lofty adventures. It's something that many of them remember and still discuss to this day. My love affair with Star Trek was never about some geeky fantasy distraction. It was built on hope and aspirations. The original series showcased a dream of a better tomorrow where a diversified group of smart people got together and finally figured things out. Star Trek exemplified a future where folks from all around the world put aside their differences and through knowledge and exploration made the world a better place for everyone, regardless of gender or ethnicity. Growing up as one of the few kids of color in my suburban Phoenix elementary school, I faced a fair amount of racial conflict on a daily basis. Star Trek gave me hope that the problems I was facing would someday be resolved, among humans anyway. I wasn't the only one who saw it this way. A few years ago, I learned that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. watched the show with his family, as he felt it was one of the few programs on television at the time that was worthy of his children's attention. He got what Gene Roddenberry was trying to do, just as I and millions of others did. As time went by, my fondness for Star Trek never abated. I was a thoroughly giddy 11-year-old kid when Star Trek the Motion Picture was released in 1979. Similar to 2001: A Space Odyssey, I felt as though I'd traveled to the future and was actually seeing it unfold before my eyes. I was enthralled by a beautiful and engrossing movie experience, and that film remains my favorite of the series to this day. You can see why I wanted to read this article that Jeffrey Morris has written. While some aspects changed or evolved, like the ship designs and the costumes, I still felt like it was a valid and worthy continuation of the universe I'd come to admire. It was so fun to see characters and situations moved forward in time in a way that allowed for a fresh take on a world that I knew like the back of my hand. In 1987, I was equally excited for the next generation. I can't tell you how thrilling it was to have the show back on the air and helmed by Roddenberry himself. Again, the audience was brought forward in time, in this case nearly a century, as opposed to the 2.5 years in the narrative between the original series and the motion picture. The Enterprise D was radically different, as were the characters, costumes, props, and visual effects. It was a take on the world that fit the time when it was produced, but more importantly, it added to the existing Star Trek timeline and served as a continuation. It also paid homage to the original and the films in a way that said they were still real and actually existed. It took itself and its past very seriously, and I love that. While the show was a bit shaky in the first couple of seasons, it was still Star Trek, and I loved virtually every minute of it. The same thing happened with Deep Space Nine in 1993. In many ways, the expansion of the Star Trek universe was an important reinvention. The premise of the show turned many concepts upside down, while perhaps serving as one of the most Roddenberry-esque narratives in the property's history. Set on a space station as opposed to a starship, it featured religion versus science as a central theme. It promoted tolerance and understanding in a way that challenged viewers and led to solid story arcs and character development. In actuality, DS9 is my favorite Trek for the reasons listed above. While I watched and enjoyed a few episodes of Star Trek Voyager and Enterprise, both shows never felt as solid to me. They were more like product. I called them both Star Trek Light. By then, I felt the franchise was getting old, overexposed, and honestly probably needing a good long rest. However, when I heard that producer J.J. Abrams had been given the reins in 2006, I was excited. It was clear that they were going to reboot the original series for film. I thought it sounded interesting and was looking forward to seeing what he came up with. Unfortunately, I was sorely disappointed. I won't go into my frustrations and misgivings here. A thorough analysis can be found in my article, Star Trek 09 is Not Star Trek. The pain continued for me through 2 additional films. Each one I went into with an open mind, hoping it would be an improvement. No. Yes, they all made money, but actually they didn't. But as far as I'm concerned, they were not true to the Roddenberry vision and were Star Trek in name only. Honestly, with the exception of the first 4 films, I've never felt Trek was quite right for the big screen. The show is about more than scene-chewing villains and action sequences. While it was seasoned with those elements, it was more about an exploration of humanity in an allegorical way, while at the same time exploring the galaxy. Thus, I was briefly hopeful when I heard the new series was being made for television. However, when I read the new show was going to be led by the same team that created the recent movies, I was again disappointed. Not because I wasn't open-minded, it was because I just don't think this bunch gets Star Trek at its core. To hear that it was going to be darker and more gritty made me concerned. We already have plenty of dark visions of the future on TV. Excellent shows like the Ronald D. Moore reboot of Battlestar Galactica and the amazing visions that the Expanse have, and the amazing visions of the Expanse have that aspect covered. I heard comparisons to Game of Thrones in space and The Walking Dead. Again, it bummed me out. That's not Star Trek. I want a future that inspires. One that kids and families can watch freely without heavy violence and gore. I want adventure and I want real science in my science fiction. After all, Star Trek is supposed to be about exploration and the means that will get us out there. When I heard that we were getting a prequel once again, this time set 10 years before Kirk, I became even more concerned. Will they get it right, I wondered? We've seen what that era looks like in episodes like The Cage and the Menagerie. The pre-TOS era had already been depicted horribly wrong in the 2009 reboot. At least in that case, there was a Romulan temporal anomaly to blame for the bizarre and virtually unexplainable changes in the timeline and the physics. Suffice to say, after seeing initial images of the Baroque production design of the Star Trek Discovery, I was taken aback. It was a mess. The Klingons, the ship, the costumes, it just had nothing to do with anything we've ever seen previously. Why do that to a prequel set in a time that we've already seen? I decided to not watch it. I kept my opinion to myself, but fellow Trek fans kept bugging me for my opinion. Why did they care what I thought? I even had several folks offer me access to their personal CBS accounts so I could just watch it. I resisted. I'd honestly seen enough in the previews to know that I wasn't interested. It just didn't look like it was for me. After a couple of months of pestering and arguing, I finally relented. I struggled through the entire first season of Star Trek Discovery's 15 episodes. After a very rough start, I forced myself to watch them all with an open mind. I saw things I liked. I saw many, many, many things that I didn't. The bottom line for me is that I was watching an amalgam of other shows that really have nothing to do with Star Trek. The Spore Drive is ludicrous as well as is everything about the Klingons. The Starfleet characters are unnecessarily mean to each other. The whole thing plays like it occurs nowadays. The music and t-shirts, the partying, it's all very trite. The whole aesthetic is often bizarre. The cast is okay. I actually like the lead character, the actor playing her anyway. I'm also a big fan of Doug Jones' Lieutenant Saru. While many of the sets are well realized, I still can't get my head around the show's visual effects. No offense to the team creating them, but they're way too dark and color saturated. They come off as a bad Star Wars ripoff mixed with 90s video toaster computer graphics. Plus, what's with the weird JJ warp effect? It's like nothing the elegant Starfields we have enjoyed for decades. When they were updated for TNG, at least they still made sense within the established universe. Ultimately, my point is this. Why not set Discovery in the future of the timeline, post-Nemesis? Then the producers could have done virtually anything they wanted and played it off as new discoveries or advancements, new species, even bizarrely evolved Klingons. I can't see the point in making it a prequel. I don't understand the dismissal of Star Trek canon. I'm disappointed in the disrespect to the design and writing of the past. I don't plan on watching further. I've had enough. But I hope others who like it continue to enjoy it. You can't say that I didn't give it a true shot. I think for me, the bottom line is that I honestly don't think anyone has really given creating a true prequel a shot. People make fun of the original series for its production value, saying the sets and costumes were cheap. It was quite the contrary. All one has to do is imagine what it must have been like for audiences to watch TOS back in 1966. If the vision hadn't been sound and memorable, we wouldn't even be here discussing it. Plus, I believe there is a way to take the original designs and update them with today's production design and visual effects techniques. The fact is, no one from the current regime is willing to give it a shot. I've seen fan creations, namely versions of spacecraft, over the past decade that surpass the vision and quality of what we've seen since 2009. I will await new properties that show positive, optimistic visions of the future. I'll keep watching The Orville, because for me, regardless of its humor, it has the true DNA of Star Trek. It is the current descendant of Gene's vision of hope. Sad, but true. Now, this article, didn't mean to do that. This article pretty much is the same sentiment you've heard me say countless times before. on this show. But what's interesting about what Jeffrey wrote, obviously, after the first season of Discovery on his website, is the same thing that we're getting yet again with Star Trek Strange New Worlds, which is a spin-off of Star Trek Discovery, itself a sequel to the original series. And what I'm baffled by is, along with, say, the book of Boba Fett, a lot of people have said that why do the same show again? How is Strange New Worlds going to be different from Star Trek Discovery? And they couldn't get away from the 23rd century fast enough in Star Trek Discovery because they felt too limited by Star Trek canon. So look, I understand Anson Mount was a fan favorite because he was the only character that's been in modern Star Trek since 2009 that felt like a Star Trek captain. I mean, I would be interested in seeing Anson Mount's Pike and Saru team up, and there you go. There's a Star Trek show of characters that I'm like, all right, I can get behind those people. But not only are they doing Strange New Worlds as a, well, they're like, well, we're going to make it more like and more episodic like the original series, as if that's the only problem with their new modern incarnation of Star Trek. Modern Star Trek has suffered from the same problem since 2009 that it's suffering from today. It's science fantasy and not science fiction. It's only about, it's not even about anything in an allegorical fashion. It's only about literally today's politics. The characters that inhabit these shows might as well have walked off the set of any other TV show because they act like they're living in 21st century America. They don't really act like they're in the 32nd century where humanity would be so far in advance. And that's another problem that I've always had with, especially where Star Trek Discovery is now. It's so unimaginative about where humanity would be 1,000 years hence, especially with the kind of technology that we have at our disposal now. Just think about it. Pick your favorite technology. Take your cell phone, for instance. Where do you think cell phone technology would be in 1,000 years? Look at where cell phone technology came from. We've only had smartphones since 2007, really. That's when the iPhone was introduced. And look where we're at now. 15 years later, we're carrying supercomputers in our pockets. Connected, literally, we can make video phone calls around the planet. Now, let's just take that technology. Say you're a writer working on Star Trek, and you think, okay, cell phone technology is a great way to begin. Where is cell phone technology? We know where it came from in 15 years. Where would it be 30 years hence? 100 years. 500 years. 1,000 years. Just think about that. Think about the progress of technology. This is my problem with modern Star Trek. I'm watching a show that's set in the 32nd century, and the only thing I'm getting personalized transporters and warp nacelles that are not actually attached to ships. Is that all? Where were we supposed to be in 1,000 years? How come human beings talk like they're from today? Now, of course, they have to be understood by today's audiences. But what I see as Star Trek's biggest problem is what I've always seen as Star Trek's biggest problem in the modern age. It has no real imagination. There's been no effort to recontextualize humanity itself. All we get in Star Trek Prodigy and Star Trek Lower Decks. Lower Decks is it's a bunch of Star Trek nostalgia and trivia wrapped around a modern workplace comedy. Star Trek Prodigy takes alien characters and again, more nostalgia. Hey, do you want to miss classic Star Trek? Let's show you characters that you recognize. They can't make a modern Star Trek series that survives on its own. They can't. They haven't been able to do it. Star Trek Discovery is still part of this, whatever our Star Trek is. And I see Star Trek as an ongoing and monumental failure of the imagination of the writing staff. What Star Trek should be is filled with awe and wonder. And it's not. I don't feel any awe and wonder when I watch modern Star Trek. I don't feel that I'm seeing at all a depiction of the humanity that I hope that humanity evolves into. All I see are people that are acting like they're acting right now. today. And yet they're constantly giving us more of it in the hopes that they're creating Star Trek as a ubiquitous brand, that anything that they can make with Star Trek on it will somehow sell. So when they try and sell CBS or Viacom, CBS, Viacom, to whomever, they can look at Star Trek as one of their crown jewels. But is it? Is Star Trek building any audience that didn't already exist? I don't know. Is Star Trek offering a vision of the future that is at all interesting and compelling to audiences today? It's literally a direct reflection of where we are right now. All of the interesting things in Star Trek, that the allegorical things that we can look at and figure out, oh, that's how they relate back to us. They don't really do much of that anymore. They just basically have characters in them that are us now, not the characters that we hope to be. I'd like to see depictions of humanity 1,000 years in the future that I don't necessarily recognize. I can recognize human traits, but I would like to see a humanity that is fiercely original, where somebody has really extrapolated on what the technology would be like in 1,000 years. And with that kind of technology, how would it change the essence of what it means to be human? I've often said that I think 1,000 years from now, assuming we survive this time, that we'll figure out things like life extension. Why not say that all human beings in the future live to be 500 or 1,000 years old? Wouldn't that be interesting? And if you could, how would that change? How would that change traveling through space? You know, even at warp speeds, it might take many years to get somewhere. Well, if you could live in virtual worlds during that time, and when you finally arrive at wherever you're going, your body emerges and you get to experience a new world in the flesh. Or things like that, stories like that. I have yet to see anything in these modern Star Trek shows that give me anything that I haven't seen before. So far, every season of Star Trek Discovery has just given some apocalyptic, horrible thing that's happened that the Discovery crew has to go help fix. I don't necessarily think that that's the kind of future that we would be existing in a galaxy that's as filled with awe and wonder as the galaxy we live in now. Wait till they get that James Webb telescope on and they start finding things out about the universe that I'm sure we can't even... We're going to find things out that they were like, wow, we didn't think that was true, but we will. Why can't Star Trek give us that? Why can't Star Trek give us something that is truly worth pondering? You know, as an example, this book is not for everyone, but I've often talked about the book Blind Sight. It came out in 2006. It was a runner-up for the Hugo Award. It tells the story of a first contact situation about 100 years from now. No, not a little less than 100 years from now. There was something about the book. It was really haunting. By Peter Watts, I believe. Peter Watts. And it was very haunting. There's more interesting ideas about the human future in that one book, which is pretty much true of any major modern science fiction novel. There's more interesting ideas in one book than there is in multiple seasons of any modern Star Trek show now, and that's a bummer. I've often said on this show, wouldn't it be great if the writers of Star Trek would read a lot more science fiction? People like Charles Stross or Peter Watts or Dan Simmons, read the Hyperion Saga, any of these books. One book. I could give you a reading list of 10 different books, and all 10 of those books would have more compelling ideas than an entire season of Star Trek Discovery. That would cost how much to make? How much money are they spending on Star Trek? Are we getting enough bang for our buck? I don't know. Anyway, I won't give you an angry rant, but there you go. So, just something I was thinking about. I want to say thanks to Jeffrey Morris. I did not ask you if I could read your article, but it is published on your website. So, and go check that out. Again, futuredude.com. I got some letters. You know I have letters from you. And here we go. Charlie the Unicorn. Greetings, Robbie and the PGS. It's a cold Saturday night in the Pacific Northwest. What better way to pass the time than curl up and watch a classic Blu-ray movie? I grabbed a glass of an adult beverage and put the 1941 classic movie The Maltese Falcon into the player. What a great movie. It holds up quite well. It's the quintessential gumshoe noir detective movie. The writing and the story are quite engaging. It's highly recommended for anyone who's not seen it before. Another Warner Brothers production of exceptional quality that stands the test of time. It has an outstanding supporting cast. What are your thoughts on The Maltese Falcon? Will it get a 4K release? I don't know if it'll get a 4K release anytime soon, but it's a great movie. You know, that, The Big Sleep, those films are great. I'm sure it probably will. Maybe. I love black and white films in 4K, especially if they're HDR and Dolby Visioned out, because, man, do they look good. Personally, I'm surprised it's never been remade. It certainly appears it could get reworked for modern audiences. Hell, Murder on the Orient Express got a remake, so this deserves a shot as well. I would encourage everyone to check out some other Humphrey Bogart films from the 40s and 50s. A few examples to check out are High Sierra, Casablanca, and The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. As always, my personal favorite boggy flick, or actually bogey, I guess it would be boggy. Wouldn't that be B-O-G-G-I-E? But bogey flick is The African Queen. Such a good movie. The interactions between the screen titans Katharine Hepburn and Humphrey Bogart are outstanding. You can tell both actors were having a blast while making the movie. Truly outstanding, worthy of the Oscars, 4 nominations and 1 win it received. Just trying to give some classic movies some love on the channel. Everyone, have a most excellent day. To infinity and beyond. That's from Charlie the Unicorn. Thanks for that, Charlie. Look, man, I'm a big proponent of classic films. My God, and the writing in those movies is so far light years beyond a lot of what we're getting today. So please watch classic cinema. Please. Hi, Rob. This comes from our friend Cal Swack Props himself. My God, Swack Props. You're a beautiful man. I just want to reiterate once again. Hi, Rob. By the way, if you haven't checked out Swack Props, go to his Etsy store. Swack Props, for those of you who don't know, he makes books and paper products from movies. He's got great stuff. They make great gifts. His map to the Misty Mountains from both Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit is incredible. He made a book for me, The 9 Gates of the Kingdom of Heaven, from Roman Polanski's The Ninth Gate. Check out his store. He's got something for everyone. Swag Prop says, Hi, Rob. Hope you and the members of the Post-Geek Singularity on the best of health. I've mentioned to you before that I'm a huge Boba Fett fan. So much so that I've built both the Empire and the Jedi versions of his costume and have been trooping as him with the local chapter of the 501st Legion since 2012. For almost 40 years of my life, I've wanted nothing more than to see Boba Fett emerged unscathed from the Sarlacc pit, and for him to continue kicking ass in the galaxy. Now that we're 3 episodes into the Book of Boba Fett, though, a part of me wished he'd stayed dead. As I posted in the Post-Geek Singularity Facebook group after the first episode came out, I thought the show was off to an underwhelming start. The second episode was much better, although Fett's characterization still felt off. It was nice to see him thrash the Sons of Tatooine biker gang with their ridiculous big embroidered chapter patches on the back of their jackets. It was reminiscent of his debut in Season 2 of The Mandalorian when he layeth the smacketh down on the contingent of stormtroopers and destroyed 2 carriers carrying dozens more. But then we get Episode 3, which is the gift that keeps on giving. In my opinion, that it has given birth to countless funny memes daily, absolutely ridiculing scenes from that episode. Surely the folks at Lucasfilm were quivering at the kind of backlash that episode has garnered so far, and I hope for their sake the next 4 will make us forget Episode 3 ever existed. In a way, I kind of get why Disney is not making as much of an effort with the Boba Fett character as they did with The Mandalorian. After all, The Mandalorian was a shiny new project, born, developed, and nurtured under the stewardship of Disney. Boba Fett, on the other hand, is a character brought over from the Lucas era and is basically over 40 years old. It's the classic example of some parents giving more love to their biological child than their adopted one. Since his last appearance in 1983 and demise in the Sarlacc pit, there have been many attempts to bring the character of Boba Fett back into the mainstream Star Wars storyline, either through books, comics, games, and even fan films. Star Wars 1313 was a Boba Fett-centric game project that LucasArts developed but later abandoned after the Disney takeover. Since then, many directors were tasked to bring the character to the big screen, among them Josh Trank and James Mangold, but none of them succeeded. Disney then decided to change direction. They took all of that Boba Fett groundwork and channeled it into a new character, the Mandalorian. After all, the Mandalorian is everything fans wanted from a live-action Boba Fett show. Characteristically speaking, he is Boba Fett. Ice cold, ruthless, keeps his helmet on at all times and speaks very little. And yes, he disintegrates people too. Season 1, Episode 2 with the Jawas. His costume design is only slightly different from the Boba concept art for Star Wars 1313, and he carries a huge-ass pulse rifle like one animated Boba Fett carried in the holiday special. A lot of resources, old and new, were poured into developing that one character, and it shows. Aside from one or two fillers, the episodes of The Mandalorian were wildly entertaining and are very rewatchable. In keeping with The Mandalorian's penchant for reintroducing characters from Star Wars lore, poor old Boba Fett was resurrected to help him in his quest. And like I said earlier, what a reintroduction. I remember cheering loudly as Boba dispatched those poor stormtroopers who had no idea who they were up against. So why did Disney drop the ball with the Book of Boba Fett? Why is his characterization so vastly different in his own show from his original trilogy self, or from his reintroduction in The Mandalorian? Simple. Disney's adoptive son cannot in any way supersede its biological son. Yeah, they'll give Boba his own show and they'll still make him a badass, but not too much though. After all, there's room for only one ultimate badass in Mandalorian armor in the Disney Star Wars universe, and he's clad in shiny Beskar, carries a huge rifle, a Beskar spear, and the Darksaber. So they gave Boba character flaws. Always have to have a back-to-tank nearby, too compassionate and too tolerant and always in need of people to help him out of sticky situations. In a way, I suppose the Book of Boba Fett is also Disney's attempt to make peace with George Lucas after the debacle with the sequel trilogy and Bob Iger's broken promises as detailed in his autobiography. Just how far Lucas can put up with Disney taking Boba in a different direction, only time will tell. As for us fans, we only want our beloved characters getting the treatment they deserve. We're sick of seeing our childhood heroes being turned into deadbeat dads, a flying Mary Poppins joke, or a murderous uncle, just so that new heroes can be brought to the limelight. The new stewards should either give them the proper treatment they deserve, or they should just let them be. I'm looking at you, CBS Viacom. Anyway, those are just my 2 cents on the Book of Boba Fett thus far. I hope for the sake of our favorite bounty hunter, the next 4 episodes will be so mind-blowing that we'll forgive the overwhelming start. Otherwise, I'll just insist that Boba died in the Sarlacc in my own head canon. Best regards, and may the Schwartz be with you, a.k.a. Swack Props. What more needs to be said? What a great letter, Swack. Cal, that was very well done. I agree with you. I don't like this idea that we're turning all of these anti-heroes or villains into these, like, noble characters. I like bad dudes. The fact that Boba Fett is turned into this compassionate soul is sort of strange to me. I mean, I understand it's the Disney-fied version of Boba Fett, but I do wonder what would be... I mean, if you're going to make a Boba Fett show, why not look at the Sons of Anarchy? Or something like that, or Breaking Bad, as an example of where you could go with a show like the Boba Fett show. Instead, when they're looking at, well, we're going to make it more like Dances with Wolves. I mean, I'm hoping it goes somewhere good, like you, Swack. I find it so interesting that nowadays, all of this resurrecting of old IPs, it's just inherently lazy. And I understand from a monetary standpoint, it's a lot easier to roll the dice on something you know as opposed to something you don't. But I wonder, what is it really doing to our culture? What is it really doing to us? What is it really doing to the creative impulse? Where's Hollywood going to find things to remake in 20 years? Are we going to watch Ghostbusters after the afterlife? Where are we going? Don't know. I don't know if I care to know. But we'll see. But a good letter, Swack. Joe from Montreal writes in and says, "Hey, Rob, people are now complaining that Helen Mirren is playing Golda Meir. I don't get it anymore. I understand the outrage if someone white is playing a visible ethnicity, black, Asian, Latin, etc. But much like Rub and Tug, that was the movie that Scarlett Johansson was going to play a trans character in, shouldn't actors be able to play anything? Eric McCormack isn't gay, but played a gay man for more than a decade. Neil Patrick Harris is gay and played a straight guy in How I Met Your Mother. And they played their parts well. Now, just because Helen Mirren isn't Jewish, there's an issue with her playing such a historic figure. Helen Mirren gets people to watch whatever she's in. She's an Oscar-winning actress who still gets butts and seats. And isn't that the point? To get the movie made with a reputable and talented actress and make a profit? Sure, you can get a Jewish actress, but will the end result be better? Maybe. But will a producer take that chance? I'm not sure about that. Joe from Montreal. Joe, I'm with you 100%. Like you, I don't believe that a black character, as written to be a black character, should be played by somebody who's not black. I think that's a little silly. I wouldn't want an Asian character to be played by a non-Asian actor. You don't want Breakfast at Tiffany's in the modern age. But when it comes to religious or things like that, Golda Meyer, I think, should be able to be played by anyone. That would be like saying, well, if somebody was Catholic, you can't have a Christian actor playing them. Could you? No, it's silly. Actors are not supposed to be the people they're playing. That's why they're actors. And this idea that... Now, I do understand... I think there's two things going on that have bothered me. One is there is a lot of actors, whether they're people of color, whether they're LGBTQ actors, that haven't had the kind of opportunities that perhaps they should have. I think your examples of Eric McCormack and Neil Patrick Harris are great. I'm a huge Neil Patrick Harris fan. He was great in Gone Girl as the obsessed ex-boyfriend of the amazing Amy. And I wouldn't want someone to be like, come on, man, you can't have a sex scene and then have Neil Patrick Harris getting killed if he's not a heterosexual man. I don't look at Neil Patrick Harris when he's in character and think, when I saw him as the analyst in The Matrix Resurrections, I didn't look at Neil Patrick Harris and think to myself, that man's gay. No, I think about the same thing I think whenever I see Neil Patrick Harris, which is, that's Doogie Howser, MD. I've always liked Neil Patrick Harris ever since I first saw him. He always brings the noise. He was great in Starship Troopers. And honestly, in How I Met Your Mother, he was damn good. Just like Eric McCormack, who I have worked with and even directed, is a phenomenal actor, and that's why he got the role of Will on Will and Grace. If they tried to make those shows today, I mean, of course, Neil Patrick Harris would be given a pass, but Eric McCormack would be crucified. And yet, I really liked Will and Grace. I really liked How I Met Your Mother. And I don't even like sitcoms very much, but I liked that one, and I liked him in the role. Joe, I think you're spot on this. So, there you go. This next letter comes from Dennis. Dennis says, Dear Mr. Burnett, I first came into awareness of you through some other YouTube content creators, primarily The Critical Drinker, a.k.a. William Jordan. I thought that your behavior was of the highest order in your interactions with everyone from Mahler to It's a Gundam. That's very nice of you to say. I very much appreciate that. If nothing else could be said of you, it would be said that you are a gentleman, a title I do not credit lightly. I then proceeded to look at your channel and listen to your takes on story, myth-making, imagination, the nurturing of our culture, and the shaping of our souls. I do not agree with you on everything, of course, as nobody should expect, for that would make a trite world full of sameness. I more than anything appreciate your honest and heartfelt efforts to advocate for a better tomorrow and better stories, to nourish the hearts and minds of ourselves and those of generations yet unborn. I thank you for your kind disposition, your earnest appeals to goodness, and your chivalric treatment of others. Well, that's very nice of you to say. I did not write this myself. Dennis wrote this. One request is a personal one that is of the greatest selfishness. See, I'm an amateur writer, a more lowly creature I know not of. When I was a boy growing up in a rural area, I would run into the woods with sticks. My family thought it all very strange and still joke about it to this day. But each stick was a character in a story. And when I held the stick, I became that character. Heroes, villains, damsels, and demons were all in those sticks. I did this all in secret, fearing that I would be called immature and childish. That boy in the woods, covered in dirt and mosquito bites, still has not grown up. I started my life after high school. I was salutatorian back when high schools had such things. Do they not do that anymore? What, they can't single out great achievement, great academic achievement? Very promisingly, as I am very smart, my apologies for the lack of humility, and I got into and attended medical school for 2 years. I, however, always felt the tug of insincerity. I have never been able to entirely commit myself. There was ever something pulling me back, denying my best and most sincere effort. This culminated when I was unable to pass the Step 1 licensing exam to become a doctor. I tried and wept and felt my life crumble as I failed to become what I spent my whole life trying to be. It was such disappointment that my mother got an antidepressant medication over the incident. I went from walking halls in a lab coat and working with million-dollar centrifuges and electron microscopes to mopping the floor of a rent-to-own used tire shop. I'm very poor at mopping, by the way. I'm now 32, single, nearly $100,000 in debt from medical school, and I have bounced from job to job with no real career. I've worked in sales and construction and a dozen other things. I could not get into dental school even with excellent DAT scores because we do not want to be your second choice. However, all of that is a backdrop. I wanted to tell stories. Twice, I'd started novels, and twice I failed. Still, I worked and studied writing. I watched every lecture on YouTube done by Brandon Sanderson. For those of you who don't know, and as Stubble McShave would tell you, Brandon Sanderson took up the novel of the Wheel of Time novels from Robert Jordan. I listened to every one of Patrick Rothfuss's failed podcasts. I read books on stories from Save the Cat, written by an old friend of mine, Blake Snyder, to The Hero with a Thousand Faces. I've studied Homer and Shakespeare and Milton. I've probably had imaginary arguments with Mahler's videos for hours, having seen every single one multiple times. If there is a story discussion, I would voraciously consume it. I often fall asleep to videos I've already seen about the topic. Starting in 2020, I tried again, working hours in silence. I recently finished my first novel. I've been sending it to beta readers to look at, and I hope with all of my heart that one day it might get published. I'm not asking for you to read my work nor anything professional of the sort. I would not be so demanding of your time. What I ask, if you could be so kind, is some words of encouragement. Every hour I doubt myself, frustrated and tired. Every day I question if I haven't done anything but frit away my life on nonsense. I know that even if I get published, I will likely not make enough money to live off of it. All the same, the idea of bringing someone a smile from a story I told is my crusade and calling, though I may be tilting at windmills, calling them giants. Nobody knows what I've done. My beta readers are all strangers. My request is a simple and rather selfish one. I ask, if you could afford it, to perhaps give me some words of encouragement. I doubt I am the only one to have such a request, and it's rather silly of me to make such a claim of you. All the same, I would appreciate it. Thank you for your time. This message was far too long and completely self-indulgent, but it was honest. Dennis. P.S. Could I get a link for the rules to your short story competition? I could not find the actual rules, length, topics, and such on the site. Thank you again. Have a better day. Well, first of all, Dennis, a great letter. Now, I would say this, as far as words of encouragement, you painted a picture for me of you being a failure, stopping medical school, having odd jobs, all of that. But here's the thing. You, my friend, actually finished writing a novel. Now, I know at first, I've always wanted to write a novel. I've never even started trying. It's the most daunting thing in the world to me. I want to write a horror novel. I want to write a cross between Stephen King and Clive Barker and so many others. The John Skipp and Craig Spector, Dave Scow. You know, that's one of my goals in life, is I want to write a balls-to-the-wall horror novel. I've never had the courage to even write a sentence. You, my friend, Dennis, you finished a novel. Now, I don't know anything about your novel. I don't know what it's about at all. But you finished it. You sat there, you attacked a blank page, which in my mind is probably the most daunting piece of art. Like, I can't paint, so I'm never going to sit there and go, well, I can't draw either. So I'm never going to be Rembrandt or Da Vinci or anyone. I'm never going to paint. But writing is something I've done in various stages all of my life, and yet I've never tried to write a novel. And you finished one. You did it, which means you have the ability to finish a second one, and a third one, and a fourth one. Look, I don't presume to know the life of a writer. You know, I've read lots of books about writers and a lot of books on writing, but I don't know what it's like to actually put pen to paper or keyboard to screen to create a novel. And you did. Now, I'll tell you something kind of funny. I wanted to be a movie director. I've only made one movie in my entire life. It's little scene. You can't even get it right now. But after it was made, I got to travel around the world. I got to go to lots of film festivals. I sat in a lot of theaters where people loved my movie. I felt their laughter. I saw them respond to it. And if I ever get to re-release it, I'm going to make it a little bit better, And yet, after I'd made that movie, while I've always wanted to make movies, and I still want to make movies, and I've produced movies, and I've documented movies, there was a great satisfaction that came with making Free Enterprise. Because when I'd done it. No one could ever take it away from me. Well, I feel the same way about what you've done writing a novel. Now, look, everyone knows any great writer. Last night I was listening to Harlan Coben on NPR last night. It was after I'd taken the garbage out, and I went to drive to get something to eat, and Harlan Coben was on a BBC show. And, of course, Harlan Coben made a deal with, he writes mysteries and thrillers, and he made a deal with Netflix that they've been adapting. He's had movies made of his books in French, and they're adapting on Netflix 14 of his novels. He was pretty uplifted about it. He was a pretty uplifting guy to actually listen to. And he's even working, his daughter is even writing screenplays now, scripts for some of the shows that he's producing from his work. And, he said the standard things. He said a lot of great writing is rewriting. And one of the things that screenwriting will tell you, and I've read a lot of screenplays in my life, and there's a lot of screenwriters who get trapped in the idea of rewriting, that they'll rewrite scene after scene after scene, and they'll never finish their screenplays. And I would say, don't ever do that. What you have to do is, as you know, you just have to keep writing. You move forward. It's a lot easier to rewrite your work than it is to rewrite work you haven't done. And you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. John Campea says that a lot. It's a sports metaphor. But I would say this, if you're 30 years old, you can't think of time as something that is either gone or time that you have left. You have to start thinking and living in the now. What is it you're doing now? What you're doing now is trying to become a writer. And what do writers do? They write, and then they rewrite. And if your first book doesn't get published, maybe your second book will. And the thing is, I would say this, I've never been able to concentrate on one thing because I've never had the great financial success to do so. Look, I've got an animated series I worked on that dropped today on Netflix. I have a movie that you can get on VOD that I produced and edited. I'm still on YouTube. I don't make enough money doing all the things I love doing. I haven't had any great commercial success, but yet I still love to do it. I love to do it for its own sake. And eventually I'm going to have a body of work. You can see a lot of things I've worked on. Not a lot of them are big budget movies, but even something like Paradox, Mike Hurst's movie Paradox. It's a time travel thriller that was made for $250,000 in basically 3 rooms, a hallway, and a parking lot. I'm really proud of the work I put in on that movie. You know what? I'd put it up against any movie made for the same budget, or maybe even a larger budget. If you want to see I think a cool little low-budget time travel thriller that's an homage to James Cameron and John Carpenter, and you've got 90 minutes to fritter away, you could do worse than watch Paradox. I'm proud of that work. I busted my ass on that work. And we finished it. It has visual effects that each cost $27 a shot. Not kidding. $27 a shot. Obviously, they look it, but it still works. I still enjoyed working on that movie. And the thing is, you're already there, man. You have become a novelist. You wrote a novel, and you're going to write another novel, and probably another novel after that, and another novel after that. And if you focus on the work at hand and get it done, well, you never know where you're going to go. If you pour all that passion in, you've overcome the hurdle that many people never overcome, and that is you actually accomplished something. You finished it. You can hold it in your hand. You can give it to beta readers. Now, here's the thing. If you get notes back and people eviscerate your work, well, that's when the going gets tough, the tough get going. That's when you hunker down and you get into rewriting. And here's the thing. A lot of creative people, when you make something, you hope others like it. That's the whole point of making it. And when you get criticism back, you tend to want to be combative with people. You want to explain. Never explain anything. If you have made something and there are people that give you criticism, if 10 people give you the same criticism, the problem is not with them. It's with your work. But that's a great indicator to find out, okay, here's where I have to look. Because at the end of the day, when you're writing a book, it's not for you. I mean, some people say, I write for myself. I don't believe that. When you're writing something, when you're creating art, it's for others. People are compelled to create art. I understand that. People are compelled to write. But you know what? Never take the idea that, well, I just do it for myself. No. You should have the idea that you're writing a novel, like you said in your own letter to me. You want other people to smile at your work. You want to affect other people. That's one of the great things about creating art, is it's for other people. It's a way to share yourself with the world. And never take that lightly. Dude, you're already there, man. You don't need my words of encouragement because you've already done it. You should look at the accomplishment of writing a novel and think to yourself, I did that. Nothing else matters. You already did it, and you're going to do it again. And you're going to make that novel the best novel it can be. And someday, you are going to be published. It is an inevitability. And nowadays, even if you have to first self-publish your first book, I mean, isn't that what Andy Weir did with The Martian? He self-published it in chapters. I mean, nowadays, you don't have to listen to some publisher that say, well, I'm not going to publish this book because we're only looking for this thing or only looking for that thing. Yeah, today. But I would encourage you, make the best work you can, make your novel the best it can be, and get it in front of the world because you never know what's going to happen. I congratulate you, sir, for actually doing what you said you were going to do, because that alone is something a lot of people can't say. So I would love to hear what your book's about, and tell me when you get it back from beta readers. Keep us abreast. Tell us what's happened. We all want to know. Let's see what you guys have. A lot of people have been firing in books from or tips and things. And wow, Martino Simoni. If you guys haven't seen it, last week, even if you don't care about action figures or anything, go back and watch the last episode of Fully Articulated. Watch the beginning of it. Martino Simoni made a PlayStation Enterprise video. You've got to watch it. It's classic. It's awesome. Martino says that TOS title card. Yeah, dude, I stole that from DeviantArt. The title card for today's show, the TOS title card, DeviantArt. Yeah, check it out. You should, because it's great. Well, thanks for that. I didn't make it, but Martino, you're a good man, and thanks for supporting the channel. By the way, I have my Aston Martin DB5, my Playmobil Aston Martin DB5. It's next to my nightstand. I can't move it. I just like having it there. Michael Miller sends in a super chat and says, Prodigy and Strange New Worlds were 2-season orders. They were. Lower Decks announced ages ago, and Star Trek Discovery doesn't happen unless it's contractual or they find a funding partner. SH, which renewal was never signed. Shake-up's coming in February. That could be true. I don't know. I mean, they have to. I cannot believe that Star Trek can continue on the way it's going because I can't see it being a huge moneymaker. I think that they, rather than focus on making one great show, at this point in our history, if you make a new Star Trek show, it demands, if it's not appointment television, if modern Star Trek is not the Breaking Bad of science fiction, if it's not the water cooler show, when you have people writing things, when you have people making shows like The Queen's Gambit, Star Trek should be that. The fact that we're getting substandard writing on Star Trek shows is a travesty of the modern day. Star Trek should be the Tiffany standard, and it's not. And the people that are controlling Star Trek are not good writers. And even though Kirsten Beyer, I'm a huge fan of hers, but I don't think she has the power she needs to write what she wants. And David Mack shouldn't just be a consultant on Star Trek Prodigy. He should be the head writer. He should be running that writer's room. But I understand. I know how the business works. Mikey Lito sends in a super chat and says, I want to thank Tom Jr. Jackson for calling my attention to the making of short about My Name is Polly Murray. I truly appreciate it, and I'm quite excited. First of all, everyone knows Mikey Lito. Mikey Lito's aunt was Polly Murray. And My Name is Polly Murray is a great documentary about a very unique individual and a great American, and I can't recommend it highly enough. Narf sends in a tip and says, Hey Rob, I couldn't find in my TV listings for the next Seahawks game. Strange. You had to go there, Narf. You had to go there. Why'd you have to go there? Yes, I know. My Jedi Knights, the Pacific Northwest, will be back next year. They'll be back next year. We'll see. Anonymous sends in a tip and says, I don't know if it's just me, but is Peacemaker trying to be woke? I mean, from the opening hospital scene, it shows you that they're trying too hard. Listen, I'm all for equality in movie and TV shows, but once you start saying stupid shit like that, you start to lose people. I don't know. I wouldn't accuse James Gunn of it necessarily being woke. I think he's definitely playing with those notions, though. I mean, come on. The Peacemaker isn't exactly politically correct. Listen, just as evidenced by Robert Patrick's diatribe, or just his lines of dialogue when he asks his son, "You kill anybody?" I mean, that was one. The racial epithets coming out of that guy's mouth. That was, I wouldn't call Peacemaker woke, but I think you can still be mindful of all people and still be bawdy and irreverent, and you can do all those things. But you know what? Now I'm going to go back and watch the first 3 episodes again just to think. You've now given me something to think about, because I'm like, is it? You know what? Maybe I'm going to have to revisit that. And Fearter Grimm has subscribed to the channel. Look at that. Nuno Diaz has subscribed. Nuno Diaz has subscribed twice. Mercer Create sends in a super chat and says, Orville, 3 out of 10. Catch the wisdom, catch the wit. Are you not an Orville fan? You're saying it's only a 3 out of 10 show? I don't know. Michael Miller sent in a super chat and says, I had a chat to a friend. NBC offered to buy Trek. NBC offered to buy Trek. Viacom wanted $4 billion. NBC laughed and wanted $900 million. Let's say, are you saying that somebody at NBC offered to buy Star Trek from Viacom and they wanted $4 billion? Star Trek is simply not worth as much as Star Wars. It never has been. If you look at the box office of Star Trek movies and the ratings of Star Trek shows, there's no way that Star Trek has a market valuation of $4 billion. Certainly merchandise alone, there's no way. By the way, where is all the Star Trek merchandise for Star Trek Discovery and Prodigy and Lower Decks? Where is it all? Aside from Eagle Moss and now X06. I know, X06, my most beloved new action figure company. They had to make Discovery figures. I get it. I understand. But where is the merchandising? You know, I don't know. But I will say this. I got my EMH figure. I got Q coming. I got Mirror Spock coming. But yeah, that's pretty funny. I don't know if that's true. Toys R Us Kid sends in a super chat and says, "Hey Rob, the easy fix to remove Bad Robot from canon is referred to the era as a bad holo novel by one of the main characters in a new series of Real Trek." Well, the one thing about Bad Robot movies is they do take place in an alternate universe. Look, Star Trek has already been setting up the idea in Discovery that there's a multiverse. Yawn. Look, Star Trek Coda did it much better. But yeah, everyone's doing that now, and it's only a matter of time. I mean, you saw it on Prodigy if you're watching Prodigy, which is not a bad show. A Star Trek Prodigy is not a bad show. Although I have a fundamental issue with Star Trek Prodigy in that it's not about human beings. You know, the whole thing about Star Trek, it should be about human beings making their way through the universe so we can reflect back on it. When you make a Star Trek show with all aliens, I mean, I understand they're human proxies, but it's sort of is that Star Trek? I mean, I think that Star Trek is, by definition, should be a show about the human experience. The human adventure is just beginning, after all. That's what they said. Jason Todd subscribe to this channel. Jason Todd, aren't you dead? Just kidding. Thanks for the subscription. Joshua Elias Note sends in a super chat and says, "On-screen Lieutenant. Captain Burnett. Great to see you talking Star Trek again. All the best from West Yorkshire." Do you know heel versus babyface, my favorite Yorkshire man? Matt Tween, haven't seen you around these parts. It appears to me the writers of Disco make every crisis resolvable by simply sharing and talking about our feelings. It's one long therapy session. Oh, I don't disagree. And they, the idea that whoever created this gravity anomaly is the species, whatever it is, 8472-655-4321 Jenny, whatever or 8675309 Jenny, whatever this, that's an interesting idea. But why do they have to create this planet-destroying gravity anomaly? Wouldn't it have been more interesting if they made a much more intriguing mystery that didn't involve blowing up yet another planet? Why is it in modern shows, modern Star Trek, it's like, well, let's blow up another planet? Like, why? Is that the only way you can set up Jeopardy? It seems so silly. Yep, we're going to blow this up. Yep, we're going to destroy this. Yep, we're going to do that. It's so lame. Tom Jr. Jackson. Oh, Yvette Mimay. Weena from the Time Machine and from the Black Hole. Yvette Mimay has died at age 80. I loved Yvette Mimay. Wow, I'm surprised. I didn't even know she was still alive. Man, was she a hottie in the Time Machine. Oh, that's very sad. Very, very sad. What a bummer. Dave S., thanks for becoming a member of the channel, Dave. That is very nice of you. We will be doing another member call in a week from this weekend. We did one last weekend. It was great. It was like a 4-hour member call. If you're a member of this channel, you come to we have member calls, and it's a lot of fun. We just chat. Darth Plato says, "It's a shame that the current Trek writers have all drank the blood of Kurtzman. I count the days until Trek creators wake up from the black sleep of Kurtzman." Well, I hope it happens soon. Oh my gosh, look who it is. It's sci-fi author B.L. Alley. Have a butter knife. B.L. Alley, resubscribe to the channel. Everyone, welcome writer B.L. Alley, a vibrant member of the Post-Geek Singularity community. Welcome back to him. Maybe now that he's back, we have to bring back whining about movies again, which we're going to do. Because if you haven't seen B.L. Alley's movies, his videos before whining about movies, or in Robservations, they're very funny. So it's good to have you back, BL. Hope to see you around these parts more. You wrote me a letter recently. I was going to share it, but I didn't. I don't think I did. Did I? I don't think I did. I didn't know if I had permission to do so, but I will if you want me to. Ooh, this is a good question. Georgie sends in a super chat. Hi, Rob. Tony Scott's Revenge, theatrical or director's cut. There's a German limited edition on the way. Ooh, that's tough. Okay. When I saw Revenge, I want to say I saw a preview screening of it, and it was cut down. I love Revenge. I do love Revenge. But man, it's a harsh movie. I do not like what happens to Madeline Stowe in Revenge, but I really like the movie. the director's cut restores some of the. There's a little bit of raunchiness in there that I really liked. You know, it's funny. I own Revenge on Blu-ray, and I think it's the director's cut. But I would tend to go with the director's cut. But if memory serves, the director's cut is shorter than the theatrical cut. But the theatrical cut was toned down. Like, the love scene was toned down. Some of the violence was toned down. I don't really know the answer. That's something I couldn't definitively answer. My first impulse would be to go director's cut, but I would have to do some research into that. Lieutenant Commander Salinga. I love this name, by the way. It was also realistic that Trek did not use fucking contemporary language 300 years from now. Like, the people walked and talked totally different in the 17th and 18th centuries compared to us today. 21st century humans would be alien to 17th century humans. A good point. You know, look, Star Trek, obviously, they have to make it palatable to today's audiences. But what I really liked about modern Star Trek was that, original Star Trek was they kind of talked in neutral language. There was no colloquialisms. Nobody said it was proper English, so it didn't date. When I see, again, I keep going back to when Adira told Stamets to call her by a pronoun. I'm like, are you kidding me? That's the worst writing ever. No one 1,000 years from now is going to worry about whether. I mean, the idea that you would be trans, you'd be able to take surgery, and if you wanted to change yourself, you would. Nobody would care. Nobody would care, especially in a multi-species universe where you have intermarriages between people from different planets. I mean, it was so you know how much I hate that. Joshua Gonzalez sends in a super chat and says, I just saw the Velvet Underground documentary from 2021. It was an amazing story of 1969 rock. What do you think was the best year for rock and roll? Ooh, Joshua, that would be a hard one for me to pull out off the top of my head. The best years for rock and roll. That's, you know what? I don't mean to not answer, but I would have to do a little bit of research into that. I am not, if you guys haven't watched The Professor of Rock, it's a great YouTube channel. I love the Professor of Rock is great. And that's the kind of thing I'd ask Cameron Crowe, because my knowledge of music is not vast enough to be able to answer a question like that. But it depends. But I didn't know that there was this Velvet Underground documentary. I totally would watch that. I totally watch that. Where is it? I'll go look for it. Bo Retzner, subscribe to the channel. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Alexander Wilson. Hello, Alexander. Your old pal, Daniel Alter. Yes, Daniel Alter, I've known since 1999. Said that with Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard, he thinks they will buy an entertainment asset and thinks it may be Viacom CBS. You know what? That is a compelling notion. Look, part of the reason they're making modern Star Trek is because they want to add it to their portfolio to hopefully use it to bolster their sale price. And for those of you who don't know, Microsoft announced that they're buying Activision Blizzard. I hope that means that I can get, can somebody please make me an updating of the late 90s Battlezone for PlayStation 5? So yeah, that's a big deal. Microsoft announced today that they're buying Activision. That's a huge acquisition for Microsoft, a good play, but I could see that happening. I would not be surprised. CBS, Sherry Redstone, that's what they want to do. They want to sell it off. And you know what? I would love that. I would love it. But I think Daniel Alter could be right about that. Someone's going to buy Viacom CBS. And then I hope one day that they'll hire Eric Jedrinson to go back and make his Star Trek The Beginning scripts, make that trilogy or make that series. I would make that. If somebody said to me right now, they're like, Rob, you can go make Star Trek, you can go do anything you want, but you have to figure it out in a week. What would you do? I would say I would go do Eric Jedrinson's Star Trek The Beginning script that takes place about 8 years after Enterprise, and it deals with the outbreak of the Romulan War with Earth. And he only wrote one script and he only did one draft. It's pretty good. I really enjoyed it. I really liked all the new characters. You know, I'd have people come in and like Tom Hanks and be the Admiral of Starfleet Command. There's so much that you could do with that script, and it was a cliffhanger, and it was really good, and it needs another rewrite and all that. But that's what I would make, and detail that period of history, because it's really, his script was really interesting. I really liked it. Anonymous says, I think being a Star Trek fan these days is like being a Cowboys fan nowadays. At least they get in the playoffs. I don't think that Star Trek would be getting in any playoffs anymore. Tom Jr. Jackson says, release all the PGS All-Stars episodes. I keep forgetting to do that. Yes, I should do that. You're absolutely right about that, Tom Jr. Jackson. I should. Captain Robert April, hello sir. You always send me, I never know when you're gonna, you gotta plan in advance when you're gonna do a stream. He's always sending me invitations to come on a stream, and I was like, dude, I'm in the middle of, I can't do that. Captain Robert April sends in a tip and says, Mecha Random 42 responded to a very condescending tweet from the Disco writers. I saw that. I don't know if it was from the writers or if it was from Star Trek on Paramount Plus. See, I don't get to see that Twitter feed because they pre-blocked me. Mecha Random 42 responded to a very condescending tweet. I saw the tweet from the Disco writers about why the seasons are so short, with some very ignorant cracks on the TOS writers trying to confirm. Check out her Monday stream at 1941. I saw that tweet retweeted from someone else. It was everything about modern Star Trek confirmed if it was genuine. I couldn't believe it. Yeah, I couldn't believe it. The fact that they would slam. Look, some of the great fantasists of the mid-20th century wrote for Star Trek. They weren't just screenwriters or TV writers. They were also novelists and short story writers. People like Robert Bloch, who wrote Psycho, wrote for the original Star Trek. I mean, I'm talking wrote the novel. George Clayton Johnson, who wrote the novel Logan's Run, who wrote the Kick the Can episode of the original Twilight Zone, who was one of the writers on the original Ocean's 11. And to criticize the writers of the original Star Trek is the most moronic thing I've ever heard. Again, people who are fucking ignorant and don't know shit. And it drives me crazy that I hear that. I can't stand it. But I did see that tweet. RRTNZ. Hail, Rob. Great to share Elektra Assassin with you the other day. What are your thoughts about Elektra Assassin, both when it came out and its relevance now? Cheers. Well, first of all, for those of you who don't know, Frank Miller collaborated with one of my favorite comic artists of all time, Bill Sienkiewicz, on Elektra Assassin. I loved it. Elektra Assassin is great. As a matter of fact, well, I can't reach it. It's my hardcover Elektra Assassin is right over there. It's behind the Enterprise model. I can't reach it right now, but I love Elektra Assassin. I loved it when it came out. I loved the individual issues. I loved everything about it. It was fantastic. Loved it. So, I'm a huge fan. And I think it's just as relevant today. As a matter of fact, it's more relevant today because I think modern politics has caught up with Elektra Assassin. If you read Elektra Assassin now, you're like, whoa, this is prophetic, especially in the United States. So I don't think Elektra Assassin has lost any of its relevance. Ria Lavi sends in a super chat and says, would you not agree the writing was better on TNG versus TOS? That was overall a higher caliber of TV. Ooh, Ria, no. I'll tell you why I think that. While Star Trek did have, it had, the original series had Gene Kuhn, it had Roddenberry, it had Dorothy Fontana rewriting other people's scripts. But I do think that when you had someone like Jerome Bixby, Norman Spinrad writing The Doomsday Machine. Norman Spinrad, a great science fiction novelist. If you want to read a great book, read Bug Jack Barron or The Iron Dream or something like that. But actually, The Man in the High Castle. No, that's Philip K. Dick. The Iron Dream is Norman Spinrad. Norman Spinrad was a novelist who wrote The Doomsday Machine. I don't think that Next Generation ever reached the heights of Star Trek's the original series heights. That's not to say Next Generation didn't have great episodes, because it did. But I think that the caliber of writing on the original series was more the writing was more archetypal, I think, on Next Generation, and the writing on the original series was more, I don't know, what would I call it, gritty, maybe. The problem was the way it was all presented, I think. The tone of it. So it's really hard to go back and watch the original series and like look, I love the Best of Both Worlds, but to me, the Best of Both Worlds, that episode, the writing isn't necessarily great writing. It was a great Next Generation episode, but was it timeless writing? I don't know. I mean, I would tend to, there's an argument to be made both for or against, but I would take, if you took the 10 greatest Next Generation episodes and the 10 greatest Star Trek The Original Series episodes, I think the original series episodes might win out, because the best Next Generation the best Next Generation episodes were, like, I love Yesterday's Enterprise. But Yesterday's Enterprise, would that episode work outside of the framework of Star Trek? What I mean to say is, if you took that script and, say, adapted it to another TV show, would it work? I think Yesterday's Enterprise is about Star Trek The Next Generation, whereas a great Star Trek The Original Series episode isn't necessarily about Star Trek itself. It has more universal themes. So if you were to pick a series like for instance, one of my favorite episodes, The Immunity Syndrome, you could take The Immunity Syndrome and move it out. You could move it into any different science fiction context. It isn't just about Star Trek. Whereas, or like for Next Generation, I would say The Inner Light. The Inner Light is a great Star Trek Next Generation episode, because that episode could, it's a great universal story. Whereas Best of Both Worlds and Yesterday's Enterprise, I don't think are. Because they're about Star Trek The Next Generation itself. And I don't know if I'm making enough sense, but that's kind of how I feel about that. Let's see. So yeah, it's a good question. That's a really good question. I mean, you know what? It'd be interesting. I'd love to do a debate with people about that. That'd be a fun debate to have. Claudius Bueller. That's funny. Ferris Bueller meets I, Claudius. Now there's a movie. Bonjour, Monsieur Robert. Rob, the question isn't, what are we going to do? The question is, what aren't we going to do? Don't say we're not going to take the car back. That's funny. Alexander Wilson says, have you been to Microsoft's campus in Redmond? I always wanted to see it. Oh, dude. What, like 30 years ago? I haven't been back to the Microsoft. I wouldn't even know what it's probably completely unrecognizable now. I can't even imagine what it would look like now. But I was there once. I went there with a friend of mine who worked there. Look at all these people that fuck Google too subscribed to the channel. Sam Reel became a member. Dennis Mason became another member. Hugo Boss 5150. Oh, I like that. And Tom Jr. Jackson became a member again. Chris Bailey became another member. Manowar 665 Neighbor of the Beast became a member. Darius Munchausen became a member. Jackson Jones became a member. How come you guys don't come to the member chats, man? Jason 666 King became a member. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Georgie sends in a super chat and says, is this true? Rob, did you know that John Woo's A Better Tomorrow is on Apple TV in 4K Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos? Get out of town. Are you kidding? I guess you're not, because you're saying it. Well, the answer is no. Do you know I have a great Chow Yun Fat action figure from that movie? You know what? I had no idea. Wow, why don't I have that on 4K disc? Run, don't walk, and go watch A Better Tomorrow. I love A Better Tomorrow. Adam Frascona asks, Rob, any chance we could ever see you writing for television? I never have. I've directed 5 episodes of Femme Fatales for TV, which is a show that I don't see coming above ground anytime soon. You can get the you can get the DVD set though. I don't know. I'd love to write for TV. It'd be fun. I'd love to write for TV. Anonymous says, can we just get Obi-Wan already? I feel like Boba Fett's ship is sinking. Well, tonight's game night. Midnight tonight. We'll see episode 4. And hopefully it's great. Gotta save and watch it. It could be better. Hope springs eternal. Look, I still tune into every episode of Star Trek Discovery and hope it's going to get better. And sometimes, when it does get better, I'm like, I don't know. Anonymous says, I got that one. Mercer Creates says, I meant the Orville season 4 comes March 10th. It's a great show. Oh, I can't wait to see Orville season 4. Actually, it's Orville season 3, right? Is it season 3? Is it season 4? I thought it was season 3. But I can't wait. And the Orville's just getting better and better, so I can't wait. Adam Frascona asks, this is a good question, which do I buy first, the Star Trek Original Series Complete Blu-ray set or the Roddenberry Bonus Vault Discs? You got to get the original series set. That is a great Blu-ray set. It's got both the original versions and the remastered versions. And my problem with the remastered versions, they look incredible. The visual effects are all new, and the visual effects are very hit and miss. Some of them are really, really good. Others, I'm like, I really like it best when the visual effects accentuate the story. Like small episodes, like Court Martial. I love Court Martial, the remastered version, but I love the original version of Balance of Terror. I do not like the remastered version of Balance of Terror at all, but I love the original Balance of Terror effects. So it's hit and miss. So get that. But the Roddenberry Vault set's amazing. Seeing the footage is amazing. But if you don't know the show, it's not as amazing. So I would get the original box set first. Alexander Wilson says, Rob, you sneak dissed. Sneak diss. I know what that is. Hip-hop fans know what that is. TNG and Free Enterprise, we know you love TOS over at TNG, but I think TNG was better than TOS. I think Measure of a Man and Darmok would be as good as any TOS episodes. I don't disagree with that. I mean, but again, like, here's what I would say. I think Darmok, the idea of Darmok is better than the execution. It's a great episode, but when they just team up to fight this weird kind of unseen monster, it's small. I think it's small. And Measure of Man is a great episode. I think Measure of Man's a great episode, but, it's a pretty stage-bound episode, but it's a great episode of Star Trek. I think it's one of the great, and by the way, if you get the Blu-ray box set of season 2 of TNG, the Measure of Man is 13 minutes longer. We were able to make an extended version of that episode. It's the only extended version of a Star Trek episode that really exists, and it is great. And if you get the season 2 box set, you can watch me on camera hosting the reunion of the Next Generation crew. Jeff Yerke sends in a super chat. He sends in a super chat sticker of the director's chair, which I like. I don't know what that means. What is that? What is it called? I don't know what it's called. There you go. So Jeff, Jeff, you can't send me a super chat sticker without saying Jeff and Mrs. Yerke. So you give my best to your lovely wife. Plethoriac, is that what that is? Plethoriac says, wouldn't it make more sense to put one Star Trek series on CBS to try and lure people to the streaming service? It's almost like they're hiding it. I agree. It's back like, I remember when Image Comics, for those of you who are comic book fans, when Image Comics started in 93, 94, I really admired Todd McFarlane because Todd McFarlane, all he did was concentrate on putting out Spawn. He put out Spawn every month, on time, got Spawn out, and then he made Spawn that comic, developing its regular fan base and putting it out. Then he was able to expand into toys and things like that. Unlike Rob Liefeld, who expanded, I thought, too, and I love Rob Liefeld, but he expanded, I think, too fast. Rather than concentrate on his core book, Youngblood, then there was Brigade and Supreme and all this stuff. He was putting out all these different books. And I felt that his core brand, which was that Youngblood comic, he should have spent time just developing that and his audience. I've actually talked to him about that, and I think he probably would do things differently now. But I agree. Make one really great Star Trek show and get people loving Star Trek, and then make another Star Trek series. It is clear to me that they're trying to put up as much Star Trek as they can to turn Star Trek into a ubiquitous brand as opposed to having it be great, which I think is a bad business model, and it is unsustainable. I think they're doing irreparable damage to the Star Trek brand by diluting it. Let's make a Star Trek comedy workplace. Let's make a kids show. Let's make Star Trek Discovery. Let's make Captain Picard. Let's make a Picard show. And what do they all mean? I don't think anybody really cares. They just want the name Star Trek stamped on as many shows as they can. Dieter Bastian, all the way from Saarbrücken, Deutschland. Dieter, yes. First of all, I do have your disc, and I'm going to be giving it to our favorite lady tomorrow. And Aaron will get it, and I will make a video, as always. Thanks, Rob, for giving me the day off last Sunday, says Dieter. Had a great time with Scream 5, but I'm already a fan of the franchise. Thanks, Bill Hunt, for filling in. He did a good job, but you were missed. Anonymous. Anonymous says, do you sleep with your hot toys in bed? Never. Do you think I want to roll over on one of my hot toys and break it? That would be terrible. That would be terrible. I would never do that. Never. Jeff Yerke comes back and says, and Mrs. Y. That's good. It's good that you did that, Jeff. Good for you. Adam Frascona says, Rob, what is yours and Dieter's favorite film of all time? And also, Rob, what is your favorite modern TV series? Lastly, please keep Dieter. Oh, don't worry. Dieter Bastian's not going anywhere. I'm keeping my favorite German from Saarbrücken, Deutschland. He's not going anywhere. He just wanted to go see Scream in English. And by the way, with the amount of COVID around, they might slap the smash down on theaters out there. So he had to go see it. No, Dieter ain't going anywhere, much to his chagrin. I'm not letting him go. Plus, I have too many of the discs I bought him that I owe him. So he can't go. He can't leave. I don't know what Dieter's favorite film of all time is. I mean, you know, some of my favorite films of all time, The Godfather, 1 and 2, All That Jazz, All About Eve, Almost Famous, Sweet Smell of Success, Wings of Desire, The Seven Samurai, Rashomon, Amelie. You know, there's so many. Those are just off the top of my head. A lot of A's in that list. But The Exorcist. Huge fan of The Exorcist. There's so much. I should probably make a top 100 films list of movies that I love. It's tough. Let's see. Safi01 sends in a super chat and says that Facebook post about Discovery slamming TOS authors was not genuine. The comments were, I don't think Star Trek will recover. Best wishes from Germany. Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. But back to your thing. I'm glad it's not real. But best wishes back to you. Do you know Dieter Bastian, my favorite German from Saarbrücken, Deutschland? But thanks for supporting the channel. My favorite modern TV series. That's a tough one. Breaking Bad is definitely up there. I mean, I love Breaking Bad. I would say, I really loved Game of Thrones. I adored the first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones. I liked Game of Thrones seasons 5 and 6. I really liked the end of 6. 7 was pretty good. But yeah, I've never seen something just self-immolation comes to mind. Not good. Yeah, so, but what is my favorite modern shows? I mean, I've really loved The Expanse, but it's been very hit and miss for me. I have to say that the best thing I've seen on TV, For All Mankind, is, again, it has peaks and valleys, but the last 2 episodes of the second season, For All Mankind, especially the last episode of season 2, was one of the best hours of TV I've seen in 20 years. But again, you'd have to have watched the whole show, and it's not It's not it. I really love that show. I really love what they did in that show. But my God, that last episode, and because it was earned. You know, For All Mankind is grand alternate universe science fiction. It really is, and it's just so smart, and I love it. But there are other shows. I think the German series Dark is an incredible series. I've really liked what I've seen coming out of Korea. I loved Squid Game, and I loved Hellbound. And for what I've dipped in, Money Heist, I really like. Would you call Queen's Gambit a modern series? I love that. You know what's really good? I've really been enjoying in a different way. Sex Education. I like that show. There's a lot of great TV. Now I can't wait to see what is it? What is the new series that came out, like Edition 41 or something, based on the podcast that James Wan produced about the videotapes? That looks dope as fuck. And somebody wrote me, they're like, Rob, you have to watch the show. And I showed Elizabeth the trailer this morning. I'm like, check this out. Look at that. And yeah, I can't wait to see that. But there's a lot of great TV. There's a lot of great TV out there. So yeah, Lieutenant Commander Salinga sends in a tip and says, Starfleet officers being cool and calm, composed professionals was very realistic. Astronauts today are like this on the ISS. Watch NASA ground control deal with shuttle accidents, keeping their shit together. There was no melodrama on Apollo 13. Yeah, that's another thing that I can't stand about modern Star Trek. I don't believe any of those people. It's not just Michael Burnham, and it's not because she's a woman or she's black or anything else. I do not believe that she would be even on a starship. None of the characters in those shows, Jet Reno, Stamets, none of them. Saru is the only person that vaguely acts like a Star Trek character. I don't believe any of them would be in a quasi-military organization like Starfleet. The way they act, I'm like, I don't believe them for a second, which is really problematic for the show. Can't think of a funny name, sends in a super chat and says, before the dark times, before the empire. Yes, it's true. Omar says Balance of Terror is based on Run Silent, Run Deep. Yep, it is. But that's what Star Trek would do. It would take the idea of submarine combat, World War II submarine combat, and then apply it to space. And at this, let me tell you about that episode. One of my favorites. And at the same time, what is Balance of Terror really all about? Balance of Terror is about the fact that an enemy whose society, they probe for weakness, and then if they find weakness, they go home, they report to the Praetor, and they say, look, these people are vulnerable, and their society would exploit that. They'd come back en masse. So while you have the idea of submarine warfare and combat going on, at the same time, if they don't stop that Romulan ship from getting home, they're going to have an armada of Romulan ships showing up on their border because their defenses are down. And that's what that was also about, the responsibility of if you don't stop this enemy, they're going to come back en masse and you're going to have a war on your hands. So it's not just the idea of submarine combat, it's also and then the idea, if you watch that episode, what makes Balance of Terror is one of the great episodes of Star Trek of all time. Now, I know people are going to be, the visual effects. First of all, it's a bottle show. You're shooting on little sets, standing sets. And this is another thing Star Trek was brilliant at. You're shooting it on standing sets, so you literally have the fate of the quadrant in your hands. But also, even inside, when you're going inside the Romulan vessel, and you see the Romulan commander grappling with the idea that, he says, my gift to the homeland, another war. And his second in command, his friend Centurion, it's like, well, listen, if our enemies are weak, is this not what we're supposed to do? Isn't that what our culture is all about? And Mark Leonard's like, must it always be so? And they're questioning their own way of life as this combat is going on. It is an incredibly adult, incredibly sophisticated episode. It deals with racism. It deals with responsibility. It is an incredible episode of Star Trek. Dare I say that Balance of Terror is one of the best Star Trek episodes of all time. Not only is it one of the best episodes of Star Trek of all time, it has one of the best titles of any episode of any TV show ever. And it's incredible. It's an incredible episode of TV. And I would say you show Balance of Terror to anyone. Now, there are going to be some people that like, well, the visual effects, whatever. I would watch the original episode because, man, even their plasma weapon is scary as fuck. When I was a little kid, I'm like, it was one of those things where as a kid, I was always going like this. Not because it's not my Humords for Adonais hand, but I'm always like envisioning the plasma weapon slowly coming toward me, man. That shit was good. So you're right, Omar. It is. Lieutenant Commander Salinga says the allegorical storytelling of Trek did not only overcome TV censors. Absolutely true. They got away with a lot. Things like A Private Little War. They couldn't have talked about Vietnam directly, so they made an episode called A Private Little War, where the Klingons were arming the village people, and the Federation was going to arm the hill people. It also helped overcome political social bias in the viewers' minds. 100%. No triggering buzzwords or visual cues. You have to fully watch, analyze, and reflect on the story first. Totally right. Which is modern Star Trek is exactly the opposite. It is exactly the opposite. It hits every one of those nails on the head. In case you didn't know what we were talking about, well, let's tell you. So lame. Manowar 665 Neighbor of the Beasts. A bottle of wine, Astroglide, plastic sheets, and a hot toy. Sure, like that's never happened. Peddle those lies elsewhere. Well, it's only happened when I have a partner. I never do it alone. Come on, man. There are other things to use than your Hot Toys figures. Hot Toys are too expensive. I'm not going to put Hot Toys in my ass. They're too expensive. Come on now. I can go to the pleasure chest and get something that's more economical and something that wouldn't piss me off as much. Some old guy in Hollywood says Balance of Terror was based on The Enemy Below, not Run Silent, Run Deep. Both are great flicks, though. Uh-oh. Submarine Warfare. Probably both. Omar says, in Balance of Terror, you learn about Romulan culture with one line. Careful, Commander, he has friends in high places. Instantly explains Romulans. Yep. And that was so great. I mean, you learn more about their culture in that episode than you ever learned about Romulans, even in stuff like Nemesis, where you see the Romulan High Council, or whatever, the Romulan Council, which I love. Adam Frascona says, Rob, any chance we could see you make another movie about your love of Star Trek, but this time it would be where you plan to save the franchise? Well, it's funny. If we ever made Free Enterprise 2, we were trying to make it more than 10 years ago, and we lost our funding 2 days before principal. We could do it now, and that would be definitely part of it. Although I have to say, you know what? I don't know if people would want us to save Star Trek. I think it's weird. I think that Star Trek now... It's funny to me because I don't think fandom is the same as it was. I think the difference is when I was a fan of Star Trek, I never saw myself reflected in the characters. I saw characters I would aspire to be. I think fans now, most fandom, and I could be wrong about this, it's just a theory. I haven't tested it, but a notion I've been toying with. I think fandom really loves characters now that they think that they are. That, like, people look at Tilly and go, that's me. Or Adira, that's me too. And I think, I was on the John Campea show yesterday, and John had asked, what do you think the ongoing appeal was of the Scream franchise? And I think one of the appeals is that the young characters, the teenage characters, when we saw Scream, certainly those characters were us. Like when I watch Halloween, I didn't feel that I was any of those characters. But when I watch Scream, I'm like, oh, I'm that guy and that guy and that guy. And I think that's why the Scream franchise endures, because nowadays people like to see themselves reflected in cinema as opposed to seeing characters that they aspire to be. That's just a theory. I don't know. And I think it's weird. I think by making characters like it's a weird shift. Like I was a fan of something, or I used to be a fan of something, not because I saw myself in that thing, and I think nowadays people do. You know, I haven't really formulated. This is a half-baked theory. I haven't really thought about it enough, but yeah. Well, anyway, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, kind souls, all of you members of the Post-Geek Singularity, I have to go to a business meeting. So I want to thank you for being here today for the 782nd episode of Robservations, closing in on 800. I got some plans. I'm trying to see if I can make them happen. But I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank everybody for your generous support via super chats and tips and memberships and all that. I want to thank all the great letter writers. I have an epic letter from Zephyr Chan that I've got to read. It's great. But I want to thank everybody for writing in and all of that. I can't thank you enough. I want to thank my moderating staff. Louise X Sparrow, Darren J. Seeley is here. Let's see who else is here. I don't know who else is here. No. Maybe that's just the two of you. If anyone else is here, I'm sorry if I missed you. I don't mean to. My moderating staff is great. I love them all. Can't think of a funny name. Send in a super chat and says 32 or 34C. Well, you know, I would assume if you're talking about women's breasts, or you're either talking about my waist size or a woman's bra size, I'm a fan of breasts. It really just matters how a woman likes to be touched, no matter what size she is. That's assuming, or how she likes to be touched, kissed, fondled. That's the really important part. You never know. But for me, I pretty much like all breasts, if that's what you're meaning. I used to be a 32 waist. Now I'm a 36 waist, 38 waist. I should get down to that. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you mean. Brian Borden became a member. Thank you, Brian. And Parth Trivedi. What a cool name. Parth Trivedi. That is really... you know what? If I ever... One day I'm going to name a character in some story Parth Trivedi. That is just a cool name. I don't know where that hails from, but thank you so much for the super chat. You love the streams. Cheers. Well, Parth Trivedi. That's a cool name. That's like a great, like a secret agent name, or Parth Trivedi could be like the legendary Parth Trivedi. Was somebody's like father who fought in some great war. I don't know where that name. I've never heard that name. I've never heard the name Parth. That's a great name. Is that made up, or is that your real name? I want to believe it's your real name, Parth Trivedi. You know what? From now on, Parth Trivedi it is. That must be your real name, and if it is, kudos to your parents for naming you Parth. I love that. And on that note, I would say to all of you, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And SVS Guru 2000. This is one of four. SVS Guru 2000 says 1 of 4. I recently watched Eternals. I think it's one of the better MCU films. What I liked about it was that it wasn't just about a dysfunctional family. I totally agree with you. I completely agree with you 100%. It's about the central question, is humanity worth saving? It's what drives this family apart. And at several points, characters conclude, no. Dude, I am right there with you. I really liked Eternals. I mean, I looked at Eternals as, yeah, it's in the MCU, but it didn't really get into MCU politics. You know what? You could have made that movie as a separate, standalone, non-MCU film, and it could have been really, really interesting. And there's a lot of deleted scenes I would have put back in. He goes on to say, it's especially clear when Phastos wails among the ruins of Hiroshima. Absolutely, collectively, humanity doesn't deserve to be saved to survive. It is only the potential of individuals that ends up saving humanity. But even at the end, Arishem announces that he will return to judge them. Dude, I'm right there with you. You just distilled why I like the movie. And I'll be defending that movie for a long time, apparently. I really did love Eternals, and I quite enjoyed it a lot. And I've watched it twice on Disney Plus. You know, I just tune in. I really enjoy it. RRTNZ, you guys, sends in a super chat and says, best original series trumps best Next Generation? Yes, it does. Drumhead, Measure of a Man, Tapestry, Sins of the Father, and Chain of Command say different. It's on, mate. Cheers. Well, listen, dude. Chain of Command's my favorite modern Star Trek two-parter. I think it's great. Tapestry is great, too. Sins of the Father is great. But, you know, Sins of the Father is a great episode, but it's more about Klingons and Star Trek itself, where I would say, look, episodes like Balance of Terror, Arena, the Immunity Syndrome, and the Doomsday Machine, we could go toe-to-toe. And I'll tell you something else. There's only 79 original Star Trek episodes, classic series episodes. Don't throw the cage at me and say it's 80. That wasn't a part of the original series, except as the Menagerie. The Menagerie parts 1 and 2. Come on, man. I defy you to give me the Menagerie 1 and 2 come on. Now that's a two-parter. Come on. I know it cheats though, because it uses the cage. But anyway, it's time. It's time. I have to go have a business meeting about a potential new project. I have to go see a man about a car or a man about a horse or one of those things. One of them. I want to thank everybody for becoming members and all that, for joining the channel. And this is a good stream. You know why this is a good stream? Because of you, because of your letters and comments. And this, I'm telling you, this is the best community on YouTube. I will be back on the John Campea show tomorrow. So I will see you there. I will be back here. I will not be, unfortunately, I can't do What Toys with Az tomorrow because I will be on the John Campea show, unless we can push it. But anyway, on that note, I already said every person you meet has a story to tell, didn't I? I'll just say, have a better day.